Now, it is something that we have warned about on this program for more than a year, and thanks to President Barack Obama, the United States of America is preparing to send $1.5 billion to the radical extremists inside the Muslim Brotherhood. But, of course, the shocking story is not leading any of the newscasts of the mainstream Obama-mania media. No, you will only hear about this as our vetting of the president continues tonight in The Real Obama. Now, this massive sum of money was set aside by the White House for the purpose of funding the Egyptian military. However, Congress blocked it from being handed over due to concerns about the anti-democracy movement that is now gripping that country. But the breaking news today comes to us from the State Department, where Secretary Hillary Clinton announced that she will issue a waiver to circumvent the will of Congress. Now, according to a report from Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy, Clinton will certify that Egypt is meeting its obligations under its peace treaty with Israel, and that means $1.5 billion tax dollars will soon start flowing to the Egyptian government. And yes, that means the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, it pains me to say this, and I'll prove this with the tape we have tonight, but I told you so. Here with reaction to this scary, developing story and helping us continue our vetting of President Obama is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is the president and the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Now, first of all, she's saying they're meeting their obligations. The money, as I understand it, has not been allocated. Congress tried to stop it. Here's the problem. The new government of Egypt, in the last week, has just declared Israel their #1 enemy. Did they not, sir?
Yes, they did. And Sean, I'm so glad you bring attention to this. Is our government continues to operate while the Middle East is going through convulsions and an Arab Spring. Our own democracy is now facilitating the oppressors, the future oppressors, the next generation of fascists that have gone from secular fascists and Mubarak now to theocratic fascists. And we want to circumvent our own democratic process so that we can have a discussion about who our real allies are. And you have an administration that is, I think, even beyond naive, is actually facilitating the loss of liberty in the Middle East and does not have a doctrine. We need to have a conversation. This money, we've determined in the 90s and even before that you can't buy allies. Mubarak radicalized his population with our dollars, and now these dollars will go to put into place a Sharia state, an Islamic state, which Parliament now has 70% Muslim Brotherhood on it, and yet we can't have a national conversation about whether my tax money, I as an American Muslim, whether that tax money should go to fund the Islamist oppressors of minorities and women in Egypt?
All right, now this is a very interesting point, because you're saying the United States of America. Now, we're going to go through exactly who the Muslim Brotherhood is. Now, during the Arab Spring, they were saying, and they were the likely successors to Mubarak. As bad as Mubarak was, he was a dictator. He did keep the peace with Israel for 30 years. They were saying prepare for war with Israel. One of their first acts is to say that Israel is our primary enemy. The mullahs in Iran are now saying that we've got Israel surrounded. This is not a good situation for our closest ally. So they're bypassing Congress. Now, I want to go back, because I don't understand, and this is part of the vetting of the president, how a president can be this wrong on something so basic. Now, first, I want to put up a full-screen quote of the president saying, look, when Congress is not willing to act, he said, we're going to go ahead and we will do it ourselves. But it would be nice if we could get a little help from Capitol Hill. Now, let's go back to the Arab Spring, where the news media in this country and the president were talking about democracy and the change and freedom is in the air. We now know they were wrong. Here's what the president said then.
I do have an unyielding belief that all people yearn for certain things. The ability to speak your mind and have a say in how you are governed. And that is why we will support them everywhere. These rights include free speech, the freedom of peaceful assembly, the freedom of religion, equality for men and women under the rule of law, and the right to choose your own leaders, whether you live in Baghdad or Damascus, Sana'a or Tehran. You had an Arab Spring in the Middle East that promises more democracy and more human rights for people. We will support policies that lead to strong and stable democracies and open markets, because tyranny is no match for liberty.
Now, I was warning at the time, and I'm going to play a tape of myself at the time, and I was attacked as being, quote, Muslim Brotherhood obsessed. Now, they and the extremists have won. They've come into power, and they now are threatening Israel. Here's what I said at the time. My skepticism is that we're going to see the Muslim Brotherhood, El Baradei, or some type of extremist as bad as Mubarak is, some type of extremist element take over in Egypt. What I'm worried about is that that has now been hijacked by the Muslim Brotherhood and those that want to take power, which will put in place a far worse dictatorship than we see now. I keep referring back to the Muslim Brotherhood. And their goal, they are radical Islamists. They are a danger to the Middle East, to Israel, our closest ally, and to us. What part of the Muslim Brotherhood, their desire for Sharia law and an Islamic caliphate, don't they understand? I really believe that the Muslim Brotherhood is a real, clear, present danger. I don't have the intelligence. Why don't you walk us through the Muslim Brotherhood? Their original mission was to spread Islam, radical Islam, and Sharia law. They have the support of al-Qaeda and other extremists. Hamas began as a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Tell us who this Muslim Brotherhood is that we're going to give $1.5 billion taxpayer dollars to.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood basically has many different forms. It has a violent form such as al-Qaeda or Hamas, and it has this evangelical theopolitical movement form that uses democracy to get into power, but it's a one-way street in which then minorities and others don't have power when the source of law becomes not freedom and liberty, but rather Islamic domination and Islamic supremacism, and the clerics a way to determine what is law. And unfortunately, this administration, not only abroad, but domestically has partnered with the wrong groups that facilitate Sharia and Islamism domestically, like Council on American Islamic Relations, Islamic Society North America, groups that came out of that environment in Egypt. And until we have an administration with the courage to identify our war is not against all Islam or all Muslims. In fact, we need to take sides within the House of Islam to say that we're going to advocate for liberty and not give our money to the strong horse and those people that claim to be our allies.
But the problem is that public opinion polls in Egypt showed that they wanted a theocracy. You know, and this paved the way for the Brotherhood, and this was disturbing. You know, the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, you know, that's where bin Laden's top deputy, Ayman al-Zawahiri, that's where Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, they came out of this extremist element of the Brotherhood. They said they prepare for war with Israel while the Arab Spring was going on. How is it I, as a talk show host, pinpointed exactly what would happen, and the President of the United States, with every bit of intelligence he has, got it wrong, and now is going to fund this radical government in Egypt?
Well, because the agenda, your agenda, Sean, is one of advancing freedom and liberty and American ideals that every human being across the world, just as George Bush mentioned in the Freedom Agenda, wants innate rights guaranteed by God. This administration, unfortunately, has another agenda, whether it's collectivist, socialist in its economics. It bonds with anybody that wants to create sort of an environment where democracy is used to bring into power the collectivists and oftentimes autocrats. And I think this is something we need to identify and pinpoint and tell America that their tax dollars, you know, listen, I don't think the Middle East has to any longer be torn between two choices, either secular fascism or theocracy. Just as the West went through reform and Christianity separated church and state in the West, and we got our wonderful United States after a revolution, these revolutions in the Middle East, Jeffersonian principles have not had any chance to survive in the Middle East. Well, why don't we advocate for those beginning now and not fund our enemies?
As you said, we should not facilitate the rise of radical extremism, and by supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and supporting Egypt and their new government that has declared that Israel is their enemy, I believe we're doing just that. Thank you for being with us, and we continue. We have more of the vetting of the president tonight on Hannity. Also, a shocking report, a left-wing ban